Hello everyone, Jeffrey Daugherty, the Christian whistleblower, back with you again today, and glad to be so. I want to talk to you today about something fascinating that very few people know about, and something that I did not know about until studying and researching the book Apostle Paul Antichrist, which is available at thebookpatch.com. Go into the bookstore and you can get it there direct from the publisher. You can also go to imnck.com, which is my website. I am N like in new, C like in cosmic, K like in knowledge. And it's a new edition of the book, 410 pages. That's 50 more pages, complete with footnotes and annotations. But the thing that I want to talk about today that very, very few people know about is something that has to do with the Apostle James. Now, after Jesus was gone, the church was left to James. James was the de facto leader. He was the one that Jesus had set up to follow him after he was gone. And James was the leader of the church after Jesus was gone. And James was known for a lot of things, and mainly he was known for being a person of tremendous prayer. When I say tremendous prayer, I mean tremendously effective prayer, and also great quantities of prayer. This guy prayed a lot, so much so that he earned the nickname of Old Camel Knees. And the reason he was called Old Camel Knees is because he prayed kneeling, and he spent so much time on his knees that he developed great calluses on his knees, great swelling on his knees that made his knees appear like the knees of a camel. Now, if you've never seen the knees of a camel, well, go ahead and get on the internet and look up a picture of a camel's knees. I'm going to give you somewhat of an idea of the type of prayer life that the Apostle James must have had. And just a little word on prayer here, if I may. Spending 20 years as a Protestant minister, I got very well acquainted with prayer and what people think is prayer and what passes for prayer in the traditional Orthodox Christian sense. And the reality is that it's not prayer at all. Most of what is done in Orthodox Christianity is talking, and most of what's done in real prayer is listening. Most of what's done in Christian prayer is asking, and there's very, very little asking in real prayer. Most of what we talk about and believe as prayer today, asking, begging, pleading, demanding, directing God, this celestial Santa Claus, if you will, to do what we want, give us what we want, make us what we want, how we want it, when we want it, and where we want it. That's by and large, the great percentage of Christian prayer. And then there's the whiners. And I know this is sounding a little bit harsh, but complaining and telling about how bad things are and what's going on and how wronged you've been and how bad you are, how horrible you've been. Let me ask you a question. Do you think that God doesn't know these things? Do you think that God needs for you to tell him or her how bad you are, how bad you have it, how unfair things are, how rough things are? Do you think God needs to know from you? Probably not. So most of what we call prayer is really just us wasting our time, wasting our energetic powers, and if God actually listened, wasting the time of God. I don't think that God actually listens too much. Really what prayer is supposed to be is listening. Meditating is probably a better word than praying, because it's about spending time, yes, giving some worship, yes, giving some praise, yes, giving some thanks, yes, sharing some gratitude, certainly. But if you're going to hear from God, you got to shut up long enough to do so. If you're going to hear something from the divine, you got to hush long enough to be able to do so. And that's the great failure within Christian prayer. It's all yap, 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 yap. It's all talky, no listening. And that's why Christianity is in the state that it's in today. If we would move more from a Christian prayer model to a meditation model, it would probably do more than any other one singular thing to transform us spiritually and to transform Christianity and to pull it back from the abyss of where it is. Prayer changes things only if we change the way we pray now. Prayer will change things, but only if we change the way we pray now. Prayer is not about begging. Prayer is not about bitching. And prayer is not about belly aching. Prayer is not about reporting. Prayer is really a bad word. It's a wrong word. It's a messed up word. We really should be thinking about, talking about, and practicing meditation. And right away, those of you that are hardcore dyed-in-the-wool Christians, or that come from that background, as soon as I say meditation, you start thinking, ooh, that's evil. That's what those Eastern religion people do. They meditate. Ooh, meditation sounds like witchcraft to me. That's been programmed into your mind by the powers that be within the Christian hierarchy, matrix, and power structure. They don't want you meditating, because if you start meditating, you're really going to hear from God, and guess what? It's not going to line up with what they've been teaching you and what you've been sold on. So that's the key, folks. If you think about it for more than 3 seconds, you realize they don't want me to meditate, because if I do, then I'm really going to hear from God, and I'm going to know that all this stuff they've been selling to me is a bunch of garbage. So that's the real key right there. Forget about praying, start meditating. Forget about talking to God, start listening to God. Now, that being said, don't be afraid or hesitant to give praise and worship and adoration. That's important for you and probably for God as well. But coming around to all this, we talk about James being old camel knees. We talk about James being the great prayer warrior, and probably the fact that makes that more real than anything else. And I discovered this in my digging and researching on Apostle Paul Antichrist, which is a novel, and I'm probably going to rewrite it and re-release it as a nonfiction book as well, because a lot of people just can't wrap their minds around a novel. So I am in the process of beginning to rewrite it as a nonfiction book and bring it out in that fashion as well, because maybe more people can understand it, get their mind around it. The novel will still be there. I think it's still a great read, and you should get it. But we're also going to bring out a nonfiction version as well. That'll be out soonish. We've got the new book, Aliens in the New Testament, ready to go to the proofreader and editor, and then ready to go to the publisher. So that'll be even more soonish. So we've got a lot of things in the works, and we're very excited about them. But one thing that people don't know about James, and I myself was stunned to learn this, and going through the sources, I think it's true. Can't be absolutely 100% positively proven, because, well, none of us were there. But it is believed, and there are some good sources to this, that James the Apostle was so effective in his prayer that Caiaphas, the high priest in Jerusalem during the time of James' life, Caiaphas would actually allow James to go into the Holy of Holies and pray, as long as James promised to pray for the nation. And it's interesting that after James was killed is when the nation was destroyed by the Romans. But think of that. Usually it was only the priest and that only on the Day of Atonement, that was allowed to go into the Holy of Holies. Now, the Holy of Holies was the very center of the temple. You had the outer court where everybody hung out. Then you had the inner court where no Gentiles could be. And then you had the holy place, which was kind of the sanctuary inside, where you got your candlestick, your showbread, your altar. And then in the very center, you had the most holy place, or the Holy of Holies, wherein was the Ark of the Covenant with the mercy seat. And, of course, only the priest supposedly was allowed to go there. Well, only the priest was allowed to go there, and then only once a year on the Day of Atonement. But James was so effectual in his prayer. I think of Elijah, an effectual fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much. But anyway, Caiaphas allowed James to go in there. And James would go in there and pray from time to time. And James went in there to pray about Saul of Tarsus. He went in there to try to get some clarity on what to do with this guy that used to be an executioner that was now saying he was an evangelist. He went in there to get some clarity on what to do with the butcher of Tarsus. And James, if you can imagine the picture, he goes into the Holy of Holies. He's got a thick rope tied around his waist for the same reason the high priest did on the Day of Atonement, because in case he should fall dead, no one else was able to enter, and they don't want him to rot in there. They could pull him out. And he was there looking into the Shekinah glory, which was a glory, a manifestation of the Lord, that kind of a misty, fiery thing that existed between the cherubim. And James was there, and he started thinking about what was in that ark. He started thinking about all of the things that were represented by the ark. Then he started thinking about seeing it from God's perspective. And so many things were going through his mind. So many things were coming to his mind that I believe it was here that he found the answer, and he found his ability to sit down and write the book of James, and to write the book of James in such an effective fashion as to refute and come against the rising teachings of Saul of Tarsus, who was now proclaiming himself and calling himself the Apostle Paul. James was the very first book of the New Testament. Why it's buried in the middle of the New Testament now is because those that run the Pauline matrix, control matrix, don't want you to be able to read the New Testament in its chronological order and understand the development of doctrine. But if you read the book of James and read it as the first book written to the churches, it's clear to see that James was writing to refute the new gospel of Saul of Tarsus, cum Paul the Apostle. And as we go on and look further, you'll see that Paul's first writings were to answer the writings of James, and the New Testament was a back and forth between the apostles, mainly James and Peter, until later, much later, the apostle John also got involved. But it was between James and Peter and Paul, really a doctrinal debate for the heart and soul of the Jesus movement, and one that continues and perhaps revives to even higher stature or equal stature in the days in which we are living, my friends. Well, tomorrow we'll be back with more. Until then, Cliff is going to tell you how to get in contact with me. You can reach me www.imnck.com, Jeffrey at imnck.com. You can also reach me at nckabbalah@gmail.com. And if you want my personal email, it's Gotham like Batman, LTD jeffrey@gmail.com. So send me a note, and until tomorrow, I am Jeffrey Daugherty, the Christian Whistleblower, wishing you peace and light.